speaker tonight as we continue our series of God in the Shadows is Janine Allen, who went through a motorcycle accident a few years back and is going to share her story of how she managed to see God even in that dark time. Come on up, Janine.
Good evening. My name is Janine Allen. My husband, Bernie, and I have been members of our Saviour's for over 3 decades. And I'd like to share with you a journey that we've traveled since August of 2008. My husband is an avid motorcyclist. Together we have been to the Sturgis Rally in South Dakota 4 times, the last time being in 2008. Our friends Jeff and Kathy met up with us, and we enjoyed riding to beautiful Lake Sylvan, on switchbacks and tunnels on Iron Mountain Road. We also went through Spearfish Canyon, specifically the Rough Lock Falls area where the covered wagons cross the river, and of course, Needles Highway, to name a few memorable highlights of our trip. August 8th was our last day to sightsee. We headed out on a clear, cloudless day around noon. A quick trip to Rapid City to the Harley shop was on the agenda. I asked if we could take a slight detour around Mount Rushmore. So Jeff, our friend, took our photo here right on Needles Highway just before we rode past that amazing national monument. 5 minutes later, on the outskirts of Keystone, our journey truly began. As we glided through that old town of Keystone and under the bridge on Highway 16A, a 4-lane highway, we started the incline up to Rapid City. We rode in the left lane. Our friend Jeff rode behind us diagonally in the right lane. Ahead, a swarm of motorcycles streamed down the hill towards us and towards Keystone, of course. I leaned over my husband's shoulder and innocently asked, "What if we get hit head on?" Then as I sat back, I noticed a faint shadow angling towards us, and then a sudden impact sent a jarring fist into my chest. I sensed that I was in motion. A motorcyclist had lost control on the curve and slammed into the left side of our motorcycle. If my husband hadn't turned the bike slightly to the right, the highway patrol said that there would have been a head-on crash and none of us would have survived. Believe it or not, this is the picture I accidentally took on impact. Our friend Jeff told me months later that I flew off the back of the bike, hit the asphalt on my neck, and rolled like a barrel towards him. Luckily, his wife had had a sudden illness that morning, so stayed back at the ranch in Custer, and so Jeff was able to maneuver his motorcycle away from me and lay it down in a roadside ditch. When I finally stopped moving, I lay flat on my back on the road. I tried to open my eyes, but the sun was glaringly bright, and my sunglasses had disappeared. I knew I must have been in an accident, and so I started to take stock of my injuries. I realized then I had no sensation at all in my left leg. And that's when I noticed eerily, too, that the air was strangely quiet. No throaty, thundering motorcycles, no whoosh of car traffic, no bird song, no voices, nothing. So, as I lay on my back with my eyes closed, I yelled, "Can somebody help me? I can't feel my left leg." No response, dead quiet. So I asked one more time, "Can somebody please help me?" I did keep my eyes closed because of the bright sun. I never looked down at my leg for at least 3-4 weeks, and for that I am glad. It was a good thing. Finally, I heard footsteps and a voice, our friend Jeff's. At once I knew I was in big trouble by the tone of his words, "Oh, Janine." I turned to the only power I knew would help me. I prayed out loud, "Dear Jesus, please help me get through this. I ask in your name." I'm told I repeated that prayer, a mantra, many times that afternoon. Now, our friend Jeff, who's ridden with Bernie for 40 years, has never once worn a belt when he was motorcycling. He claimed it cinched him in the middle when he would reach out towards the handlebars. But for some reason, Jeff wore a belt that day. And with that belt, he tourniqueted my upper thigh. His wife, Kathy, claims that Jeff has never been able to witness the birth of any of his 3 children because he faints at the sight of blood. And yet when he found me, my skin was torn and bunched down by my ankle like a dirty sock. My kneecap was a mass of bone shards. And I'm told my calf resembled a deboned chicken leg. And with each of my heartbeats, I was spurting blood out of my main femoral artery. But Jeff never hesitated, and he didn't faint. Jeff claims to this day that it couldn't have been him that attended to me that day, but I know who assisted Jeff. If not for his actions, I was told I would have bled out at the scene. God had heard my prayer. At the same time, my husband had also caught the motorcycle tire on his lower left calf, and it cut down to his bone. All of the motorcycle controls on the left side were sheared off, and so he fell on his right side under the weight of an 800-pound Harley-Davidson Screamin' Eagle motorcycle until it stopped of its own accord. Imagine his injuries. Help arrived in about 40 minutes. I was placed on a stretcher and put in the belly of a small rescue helicopter and flown over Mount Rushmore to the Rapid Cities Regional Hospital. And at the hospital, staff placed me in a medically induced coma for 4 days. During that time, I was x-rayed. They cleaned the road grit out of my cheeks and neck and arms. They put me on life support, and I received more than 14 bags of blood. My husband was ambulanced later to the same hospital, and Jeff and his wife Kathy then had the wonderful job of contacting our children, Seth and Heather, and Heather's new husband, Luke, who frantically made their way to Rapid City that evening. Well, on the 5th day, August 12th, my husband and I were flown home to Minnesota in a small medical transport plane, thanks to our children who took the responsibility of coordinating the trip and choosing where our recovery would take place. They really stepped up to the plate, and I am still so proud of them. To this day, I'm amazed at their strength of character and their perseverance on our behalf, because we couldn't do it at the time. God had heard my plea, and he was present in our own kids, loving us, supporting us, and helping our kids to persevere for us. Then from the airport in Minneapolis, we were taken by ambulance to the University of Minnesota Fairview. My system up to that time was flooded with morphine, and so gratefully I never felt any pain up to that time. But 4 days later, on August 15th, I underwent my first amputation. Dr. Fernando Pena cut just below my knee. I was told that most amputees do far better with their God-given knee, especially as they age and mobility becomes an issue. When I woke up from that first surgery, my family was relieved. Excuse me, but I was, for the first time, racked with incredible pain. I couldn't do simple things. I couldn't even comb my hair. I couldn't push my own pain button for relief. Our children were cautioned that I might have suffered brain damage. I hadn't worn a helmet after all when I fell. But my daughter insisted that that would not be the case. She could not be deterred in her optimistic thinking or in her deep faith. A week later, though, it was determined that what little skin I had near the knee, that was put together with nuts and bolts, was dying. It's called necrosis. And so they convinced me to have another surgery, this time above knee. The alternative was to stay in the hospital for a year and undergo 6 to 8 more surgeries where they would harvest my tissues and my nerves and my skin to the area around my knee. And there was no guarantee that those skin grafts would be accepted and I'd have to have an amputation later on down the road. So, 10 days after the first, I underwent that final amputation. And when I woke up this time, the pain was absolutely debilitating. I began to equate two P words, pain and prayer. I found that I could cope thanks to a team of marvelous pain specialists that helped me. God had heard my plea. Now, since I became more lucid due to being taken off of morphine finally, I realized with clarity that my life, as I once knew it, was over. It was a change that I had no choice of or control over. I knew my days of fierce independence were gone. No more sports, no power volleyball, no traveling, no water skiing. Becoming a marginal wife, marginal mother, marginal teacher, and maybe even a marginal grandmother someday. My imagination went wild in a really negative vein. And on one of those days I was immersed in self-pity. The cleaning woman came into my room. My eyes were closed and my head was averted from the door. Tears streamed down my cheeks. That day I didn't greet her as I usually did. She was a tall, dark-skinned woman dressed in a floor-length garment with a headpiece covering her hair. Instead, I continued to be self-absorbed, weeping quietly at all my imagined losses. The woman continued her work, and without a sound, she left. But the next day when she came in, I greeted her. She said, "Oh, your face looks so much better today." I said, "Well, I was kind of having my own little pity party yesterday. I was feeling sorry for myself." "Oh," she said, "you never should feel sorry, ever. You live in this wonderful country, America, where you have freedoms, and where we come from, we can't even cross the road without fear of getting shot. We and our children, you are in this place. They care for you, and they're trying to make you feel better and heal you. You never, ever should feel sorry." I don't think that woman will ever realize the gift that she was to me that day. She opened my eyes to how lucky I was. How dare I bemoan my physical disability when others had it far off worse than I? And from that day on, my perspective shifted. Yes, I had lost my leg in my usual way of life, but at the same time, I was blessed. I was lucky. I knew many, many people were rooting for me, praying for me, supporting me, evidenced by the number of cards and plants and flowers and phone calls and visits. People were trying to persevere for me because they knew I couldn't persevere for myself at that time. When I left the hospital 2 weeks later, it was really humbling to rely on friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, and church buddies to take me to the doctor multiple times, the prosthetist many times, clean our home, make our meals for months, and the hard hats even painted the outside of our home. I found out then, even though it was very humbling, that people wanted to help. It was something they needed to do. I understood that God was there in the shadows, reaching out his healing hands through all those wonderful people. That's how God does it, in my opinion. No spectacular signs of miracles, no fireworks in the sky, just that constant, comforting presence and love of people who hold others up when they need it the most. Well, in this 5.5 years, my list of P words has increased: pain, prayer, patience, which is something I'm not quite good at yet, and perseverance. To tell you the truth, truly, I would never go back in time and change the events of August 8th, 2008. The awareness of God's bright spirit shining through people's hearts has made this entire journey worth it. I learned to persevere because God's Spirit persevered for me when I couldn't even function. His love is never far away, no matter how deep and dark those shadows may appear. I am living proof. Thank you for letting me share.